In this video, I'm going to be reviewing 3 interesting hands from recent 200NL poker sessions. I'll walk through my thought process on each street, compare my decisions to theory using GTO Genesis, and explain where I think population tendencies can justify deviating from the solver. The first hand begins with pocket queens in the cutoff. The hijack opened, I 3-bet, and the big blind cold 4-bet. In practice, I think this spot is significantly underbluffed. I expect most players to cold 4-bet a range consisting almost entirely of pocket jacks through pocket aces, ace king, and some occasional ace queen suited. I decide to call, and we go to a flop. The flop comes queen jack 4 rainbow, giving me top set. The big blind checks, and my immediate read is that this check is going to be much more heavily weighted towards ace king than it should be in theory. In practice, players often bet their strong made hands too frequently while checking hands with showdown value too often. Ace king feels like the most natural check, while I expect hands such as aces, kings, and especially pocket jacks to bet more often. Jacks has the additional incentive to bet because it unblocks any queen X that I have and overpairs that I might have slow played pre-flop. When we take a look in the solver, we see that the big blind is supposed to bet very frequently using a small sizing, usually around 25% pot, and doing this with most of the hands in their range. Once he checks, pocket queens generally wants to bet small. In practice, however, I expect that the big blind's checking range contains far too much ace king, and fewer strong hands than it would in theory. This makes me want to check back way more often to give ace king a chance to hit a pair and then get money in the pot. With that adjustment in mind, I decide to check back. Unfortunately, the turn is a 10 of diamonds, which is essentially the worst card in the deck. Ace king now makes a nut straight, and that was already the hand I expected villain to hold most often after checking on the flop. Villain now bets 25% pot. There's no incentive for me to raise, as I would likely only be getting called by ace king, but I need a call as I have equity to boat up on the river. The river is an offsuit 3, and villain now goes all in for 62 big blinds into a pot of around 79 big blinds. I'm calling 62 big blinds to win the now 141 big blind pot, meaning I need to be correct about 30.5% of the time. The question is whether villain ever shoves a worse hand or finds enough bluffs. I would never expect aces or kings to shove, as I can have pocket jacks, pocket tens, pocket queens, and ace king myself. So shoving any overpair would be a huge overplay. I also discounted most of these combos after his flop check back because I expect players to bet them considerably more often than ace king. Pocket jacks would make a more reasonable river jam, as I could have pocket aces or kings myself. However, jacks is a hand that I expect villain to be betting almost pure on the flop. In theory, after the big blind goes all in, pocket queens is already an indifferent bluff catcher. That means the theoretical call EV is extremely sensitive to even a small population adjustment. In theory, villain is supposed to be finding jams with ace 5 suited as a bluff, which is why pocket queens can now make an indifferent bluff catcher. Additionally, villain is supposed to be checking ace king combos on the river at a very reasonable frequency. However, in practice, I think that players jam ace king on the river almost 100% of the time. On top of that, we already ruled that he has way more ace king in practice than he should in theory. And with those 3 integral ideas in mind, my queen's call turns from an indifferent bluff catcher into an extremely minus EV call in practice. With that in mind, even though I only need to win around 31% of the time with the pot odds I'm given, I think I win way less than that in practice and decide to make the fold. The main takeaway from this hand is that an indifferent bluff catcher in theory can become a very losing call in practice based on population tendencies. The second hand, I have Jack 9 offsuit in the big blind facing a small blind open. This hand can either call or 3-bet, and this time I decide to 3-bet. Villain calls, and we go to the flop. The flop comes queen of spades, queen of clubs, 4 of clubs. With the 9 of clubs in my hand, I have a good c-bet bluff candidate. The small blind's pre-flop calling range consists mostly of suited ace-x, pocket pairs, and suited broadways that call rather than 4-bet. Villain has plenty of suited ace-x and hands like king-jack and king-10 that will fold to a b50 on the flop. After the small blind checks, the solver frequently bets jack-9 offsuit with a club. The solver also picks a b50 for sizing, betting strong pocket pairs and queen-x for value. Villain ends up calling my flop c-bet and we go to a turn. The turn is a 7 of clubs, completing the flush. The solver continues using jack-9 with the 9 of clubs as a bluff and again prefers the half-pot sizing. The half-pot sizing allows hands like pocket aces and pocket kings with a club, king-queen offsuit with a club, ace-queen, and any flushes to bet for value. If I b50, we can see that villain has many continues and raises, mostly with flushes. However, having the 9 of clubs in my hand is very strong, as I block any of the suited 9x combinations that have now made flushes. The river is a 3 of spades, and now I need to decide whether or not to fire the third barrel. At first glance, the 9 of clubs looks like an appealing blocker. I remove several flushes and have no showdown value. However, the more important question is whether I have enough better bluffing candidates available. In theory, all of the combos of jack-9 offsuit should be checking back now. My range contains better bluffs with the ace or king of clubs, such as king-5 offsuit and the low offsuit aces. These cards block more of villain's strongest flushes, particularly the nut flushes that may have slow played on the turn because they require less protection. Villain is more likely to jam a lower flush on the turn and only call with the nut flush, as the nut flush requires less protection and isn't concerned about a 4th club coming. However, in practice, I do think that the bluff performs slightly better than in theory. Players may overfold hands such as pocket 5s with the club or ace-4 suited, which are both hands that are supposed to be pure calling in theory. Despite the solver preferring a check, I do decide to go all in. While I do think this bluff does slightly better in practice than in theory, I still think it's a slight overbluff. Fortunately, this time villain does end up folding and the bluff gets through. The last hand begins with pocket kings in the cutoff. The button 3-bets and I put in the mandatory 4-bet for value. Villain calls and we go to the flop. The flop comes queen of hearts, queen of diamonds, jack of diamonds. King of clubs, king of spades is an especially strong overpair, as I block every combo of king-queen suited. Villain may occasionally flat aces pre-flop, but I would expect them to jam aces more in practice than in theory. When looking at the solver strategy, kings can bet 25% pot or check. Betting can extract value from worse hands and prevent villain from over-realizing equity with flush draws. But checking keeps weaker hands in the pot and allows villain to bluff later on. This time, I decide to check and villain checks back. The turn is a 3 of clubs and I check again. Once the flop checks through, I expect villain to be betting many of his jack-x hands, such as ace-jack suited, jack-10 suited, or king-jack of hearts. He can also bet diamond draws like ace-5, ace-10, or ace-king of diamonds. My plan is to let those hands bet and then check raise for value. Villain ends up betting 25% pot. Against a smaller size, pocket kings can call or raise for value. Raising aims to extract value from any jacks that villain could have or any flush draws he decided to bet on the turn. I end up check raising the 33% sizing and villain calls. The river is the inconsequential 3 of spades. After villain calls my turn check raise, I expect most of his range to be jack-x and ace-high flush draws. Most of the stronger hands that beat kings will bet the flop very frequently or choose a bigger sizing on the turn. Ace-queen wants to begin building the pot immediately because I can call with aces, kings, and king-queen. Pocket jacks also has a strong incentive to bet on the flop as it unblocks my queen-x hands and overpairs. Villain could also have aces, but I believe that villain is jamming aces very frequently pre-flop, so he has much less combos than he would in theory. The main trapping hands villain has are pocket queens and queen-jack suited. Those hands have the board locked up and block a lot of my continuing range, so checking becomes more attractive. In theory, kings is a pure value shove on the river. I'm targeting ace-jack suited, jack-10 suited, and king-jack of hearts. I do end up going all in game, expecting to get called off by those Jack-X hands very frequently. Unfortunately, villain just ended up having Queen-Jack suited. This is one of those few trapping combinations that can reasonably take this line. Even though I lose this hand, I think my line is still completely acceptable in practice. Villain should reach the river with enough Jack-X hands that should call, while many of his stronger hands that beat kings are discounted by earlier action. These were a few hands that showed that the result of a hand doesn't always tell you whether or not a decision was good. On one hand, my bluff worked even though the combo was not ideal, while on the other, my jam for value lost even though I think my play was correct. Theory gives you a decent baseline, but population tendencies and individual player reads can make one action significantly more or less profitable than it is in theory. If you want to do your own hand analysis and check out whether your plays are theory approved, you can do that for free on GTO Genesis, link in the description. Make sure to let me know which hands you found interesting in the comments. Like, subscribe, hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next video.